Welcome back to another episode of One on One. I'm your host, Mitch Lafon. This week, joined by Russ Dwarf of the Killer Dwarves. Good day, Russ.
Good day, Mitch.
Good day, good day. Of course, one host is good, and the co-host is good, but two is even better. Back again is Mark Strigl of Talking Metal. Good day, Mark.
Hey, good day, guys. How are you?
Hey, Mark.
So our last episode, we had both guys on. It was so good that we said, let's do it again. In fact, I would do it like this every time, quite frankly.
It was so nice they did it twice.
That's right. And thrice, hopefully, at some point.
There you
Hey,
go.
remember, One on One is brought to you by the Heavy Montreal Festival taking place August 9th and 10th at Parc Jean Drapeau, featuring Metallica, Slayer, Lamb of God, Anthrax, and many more. And I have a pair of tickets to give away to this fabulous, fabulous event. Listen to our monster truck interview with Jeremy coming up in a couple of episodes from now. During that interview, he says a special sentence. Take note of it. Go to the Facebook page, One on One with Mitch Lafon. Post it there, and a winner will be chosen at random. Winners get the pair of tickets. Transportation, hotel, food is not included in the prize. So boys, today, speaking of prizes, we're talking with J.R. Smalling and Peter Moose Oreckinto, both original roadies with Kiss.
Now, when you say original roadies, Mitch, what years are we talking? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh yeah, listen, we are talking 1972, 73, all the way up until 77, 78.
Okay.
So they were there right at the beginning, and they've put together a book that they are about the road stories.
Uh-oh.
And I know, isn't that horrible when they do
That's
that?
scary. Who's getting sued first?
Yeah. The original, and anyway, the book is called The Original Kiss Krew, and there's an original Kiss Krew Facebook page, and of course, there's a website to go to, but
That sounds like it would be a great read. There's a few paragraphs in that book, Nothing to Lose, the making of Kiss 72 to 75 with those guys.
Yeah, they're mentioned quite a bit. And the I'm just trying to find the originalkisskrew.com is what I was looking for, with a K on crew. So we spent an hour talking with these two guys, and they gave us a whole bunch of interesting stories. There's a lot of details. We spoke about Bill Aucoin. We spoke about Sean Delaney and who originated a lot of the tricks that Kiss use in their show today. And the other thing is the interview was recorded on Skype, and it wasn't very cooperative that day. So we've patched together the best parts for you to listen to.
Cool. I'm looking forward to hearing this interview. I haven't heard it yet. I mean, those were the glory days of Kiss, where they went from really being nothing to the biggest band in the world. I mean, by 77, that's just when they were at their height, playing stadiums, selling out all over the world. I only not want to hear this interview. I want to read the book. So let's definitely check this interview out.
Yeah, it's a complete insider's look.
Yeah.
Fly on the wall.
Fly on the wall, and of course they offer their own personal opinions on the various members.
Oh, delightful.
I know. We are here with J.R. Smalling and Peter Oreckinto, otherwise known as Moose, both original Kiss Krew members, roadies, if you wish. Good day, gentlemen.
How you doing, Mitch?
Good, doing absolutely fantastic. Good day, Peter. It's a pleasure to speak to both of you. There's so much to talk about, and we'll try to cover it all. I guess the hardest part for me is to figure out where to start. So why don't we start in the modern era here and just work our way back? And I have just two questions. What are your takes on the four books that the members have written, Gene, Peter, Ace, and Paul? And just sort of what are your thoughts of Kiss in 2014? And then we're going to head back to...
Sure, you want to take that one, Moose?
No, you started out, JR. Go right ahead.
All right. I have no thoughts about 2014 Kiss.
Okay.
You know, I honestly I haven't listened to a complete Kiss song since Beth. To
Wow.
be honest with you, I don't know what any of that stuff sounds like. I see a lot of people yapping back and forth about the virtues of the current guitar player and drummer. And of course I'm biased, having
Yeah.
having come up with the original guys. But I mean, it is what it is. It's like when you're a kid, you eat a food and it tastes unbelievable, and then you get older and it just doesn't taste the same anymore. I would imagine that it's probably a similar thing going on with today's version of the band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Peter.
Yeah. Well, mine is that the boys are out there, making a living. All right, let's just say. And I still listen once in a while. I'll throw in a Kiss CD, the greatest hits or something, because there's some songs I've always liked. Hard rock and ass kicking type of music.
Yeah.
And then it's, I appreciate a lot of their things because people say this and that about the band, and I say, in defense of them, go ahead and try to write a song. First of all, and they're talking about who's sloppy and who's this and then that, and I explain to them, man, if you listen to that performance, they're tight, no junk notes, they're in meter, they never break meter. Musically, JR is a drummer, I'm a bass player, so we understand that. So in that regard, they're a great band. As far as the books are concerned, I've not read all the books.
Okay.
I've read most of Gene's book, that one that came out many, many years ago, and I do like what he said on, I think his first paragraph on page 96 or page 97, where he names all of us and says we couldn't have done it without them, meaning us. And he's right. Thank you, Gene.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that sentiment. But I quite frankly don't have time. Paul's book just came out. I don't have time to read all their books. And I don't want to read a book where one member turns around and starts smashing and beating up the others.
Right, which all the books seem to have done.
I'm sorry?
Which all the books seem to have done. They've all sort of taken either very direct shots or very veiled shots at other members. And even as a fan, it's sort of disheartening because you sort of like the mystique or the sort of the Hollywood version of everybody gets along in Wonderland, but,
Yeah, well, they didn't all get along from day one.
Right.
I got to tell you, because I was there, and it was kind of like, under the table because they were all trying to make it, so they just went along with it. Especially the two particular members,
Yeah, so
went along with it. But there were always threats, and there were always, I'm quitting, I'm leaving, over and over. And it just got like, shut up and just go play.
Yeah.
Was my attitude. Just shut up and play. You want to be a rock star? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Don't threaten to quit the band every other week.
Was it?
Again, that's about it. I mean, like JR said, it's not the same. To me, it's tofu today because we've heard it all. And back then, they were hungry, and back then they really wanted it and kicked ass.
Yeah. So let's get back to the beginning then. Let's forget the books in 2014. How do you individually get involved with the band? Were they sort of friends you hung around in the neighborhood? Was it somebody who referred you? Where do you come into the picture?
Me?
Yeah, well, both of you. So I'll put the questions to both of you, and I guess we'll sort of alternate with who answers first. But let's go with you, Peter, first.
All right. So I'm a college kid. I'm a bass player.
Right.
I'm working in off-Broadway theater. Okay? And I'm doing special effects. And we published this already in our one of our first episodes on our book.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, somebody Sean Delaney got the word they were looking for some guy, And I was in the West Village, and I was doing flash pots, and I was doing fog machines, and we hung a guy every night and spinning vortexes. I was doing sound. It was basically multimedia theater.
Right.
So he came to me, and he said, hey, we kind of need a guy like you, in so many words. And I said, well, who are you, and what do you got? He goes, well, we got this new band. And I said, oh. And he said, their name is Kiss. And I said, oh. And he said, they're all from New York, and they're looking for somebody to do special effects. And particularly, now I was a big guy, I was over 6'2". I was in my 270-280 football weight.
Wow.
And I said, well, let me come down. And so I talk about this, going down to Church Street. They had a loft 3 stories below the street level, and watching them. It was right near the World Trade Center, and it was still being built back in 73, late 73, like September on. And I went down there, and I met Guy Bill Aucoin.
Mm-hmm.
Guy was his nickname because his first name is, speaking of French roots, his name is Guillermo, so we called him Guy
Right.
for short.
So, wait.
I went down, and he was videotaping everything, and, I looked at it and heard them, and little by little, I osmosed into working for him. So that's basically how I hooked up. I'm not like the other guys up in the Bronx, like the Eddie Solins and the other guy, I forget his name, that were, quote, Ace's friend. I just came in.
Bob McAdams?
Bobby McAdams, yeah. Well, he was his friend until he did a hatchet job on him in his book. But, you see, I don't appreciate that at all. All right? You don't be a friend to somebody. Well, you're not really a friend.
Right.
And, it wasn't that relationship. It was the fact that I brought something to the table that they needed. I was big, I was strong, I had a van, I could play a musical instrument, so I knew how to set things up, I especially knew how to do effects. So I had 6 things going for me that this new band needed. And so little by little, I started doing stuff, for them, and did the Coventry, and did the presser at Fillmore East.
Yeah.
And then we did the New Year's Eve thing at the Academy of Music. And little by little, all of a sudden, I'm on an airplane going to Toronto to do some gigs in Canada. And so back and forth, and I just, I hung with them for about a year. The first run was for about a year and a quarter. Then I got hurt, and I was recuperating for a while, and then I went back. But I was still working for them in 75, going to the drum shop for Peter and going to Electric Ladyland Studios and all that. But anyway, that's how I got hooked up with them.
What about you, JR? How did they find you?
How did they find me? I have to go back a couple of years before that, actually. When I was in high school in Brooklyn, my house was like the neighborhood hangout.
Right.
And we had a lot of bands playing there in the basement, including my own. And one of the bands that was playing there, one of my rival bands, was a group called Dust.
Yes,
I don't know.
with Richie Wise.
Richie Wise was the lead guitar player. Kenny Aronson, the bass player, very capable bass player to say the least. And a guy named Mark Bell, who later became Marky Ramone. We were rival drummers, so to speak. And Dust's manager was a guy named Kenny Kerner. You mentioned his name.
Yeah.
Kenny was the lyricist for the group, and he was the manager, and he promoted the concerts, and we were all very good friends. Well, I had gone out on the road as a in a tour position with groups like Focus and Jay Giles. I worked on the David Bowie, the Diamond Dogs tour, and
Wow.
I had a lot of experience after high school, doing that kind of thing. And like Moose said, they needed someone around with that particular skill set, with that particular amount of experience.
But if you're working with,
traveling and putting the shows up different locations at night.
if you're working with David Bowie and Jay Giles, why would you want to go work with a band that really hadn't established itself? Why would you want to go with somebody who's just starting out?
Well, that's a good question, and the short answer is because the guitar player from Dust that I just mentioned,
Right,
Richie Wise, and Kenny Kerner, they produced the first couple of Kiss albums.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
as they neared completion of the first album, I got a call from Richie, and he was just going on and on and on about this group. They're going to be huge. They're going to be the next big thing. They got a great show, and they need somebody with your experience, to fill that void, to get them over the top with the live performances and the touring. And I went down at Richie's suggestion. They had a showcase in the village at the Fillmore East. And I went down there, and it was an industry-type showcase for, public relations people and reporters and booking agents and the like. I saw the show. I was knocked out. Needless to say, I hadn't seen anything like that before. And I said, yeah, I can do this. I wanted to work with them, even though we all accepted pay cuts from whatever we were doing immediately before we started working with them. But we wanted to work with them because we saw what they were doing. We believed that it was going to be a huge and it was going to last. And as it turns out, we were right. They were huge and they did last, except we didn't get to make it to the finish line with them, so to speak.
Right.
But,
you say
for me, that
you say that you saw that what they were doing. How was it different than what Alice Cooper was doing or what the New York Dolls were doing? What made them unique that you really figured, okay, I'll take a pay cut and I'm going to join these guys. I believe in their mission.
Moose?
Which one? Well, first of all, let's deal with the Dolls.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. They sucked then and they still suck. They really, they didn't have the music, I'm sorry, but they didn't have the musical clout or the musical hook. They didn't have the songs.
Right.
That's number one. And
Agreed.
number two, they didn't really have much of a show.
Agreed.
They were just acting out as a bunch of, glam rockers. And, again, they didn't have any music that appealed to me whatsoever. If you put them side by side, at least there was some rhythm, there was some rhyme, there was some, high performance, great playing on behalf of Kiss, by the boys, I should say. However, regarding Alice Cooper, now I worked for Alice later on in the Whiskey and Lace tour in the late 70s with Frankie Scanlaro.
Yeah.
And Alice was a little bit different. I mean, he had effects. All right, but he didn't have open explosion like we did.
Right.
We were the first band to bring open explosion to the stage, bar none. Cooper, what was the difference? Well, both of them were in the effects side of a performance, like the guillotine and all that other good stuff. He had the snake, Alice. That was a weird story about that snake. So he did use props like Kiss. That would make the two of them the same in my mind. But what was unique about Kiss is that they were disciplined, they had a show, they had a choreography, which was taught to them by Sean Delaney.
Absolutely.
No bones about it. But the opening of Deuce and that back and forth that they do, that was all choreographed by Sean. So they had discipline, they had a performance, they had effects, and, basically that was what set them apart from everybody else. Everybody else from the two bands you were talking about.
Right.
Now, what do you think, JR?
Yeah, well, Kiss's show was just an assault on the senses.
Right.
One thing, they were one of the loudest bands. They came out and just assaulted you, sonically. The songs were very raw and rough and in your face kind of thing. Visually, of course, with the costumes and the makeup and the leather, four guys jumping around like that. Alice was one, and this was him times at least four, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
But then of course there was the special effects with the bombs and the fire spitting and the levitating drums and everything. There was never a moment to breathe. At a Kiss gig, especially in the early going, there was always something going on to keep, all of your senses fully engaged in what was happening on that stage, and that was the vibe. That's what they wanted to do, and they accomplished it.
They really did. So you're there in the beginning, and you're putting the shows together, you're getting choreography put together, and the band gets into the studio. If you can, both tell me about what do you remember about the first recording session? Were you at all present, either one of you, for that?
I wasn't, not for the first album, no.
Okay. And JR?
Yeah. No, it was very interesting. They recorded the first album before I came on board.
Okay.
But it was always interesting to me how I don't know if it was purpose or what the case. The recording session was definitely something that was looked on as being totally separate from what was happening within the live side of the band. Our thing was downtime. There really wasn't very much downtime in those early years because, that first year we did over 200 gigs and, they did a couple of albums. Like I said, the first album they did before I came along, but then they did Hotter Than Hell that year as well. So you got to figure, two out of three days the group was either on stage or traveling to the next stage or in the studio. So there wasn't really a whole lot of time to gather oneself. Any time that the band was in the studio was time for the crew to be upgrading their equipment. There was always something to be made bigger and better, and that's how our time was spent. By the time that they got around to doing some of the other recordings, I mean, we sang background in Rock and Roll All Night Party Every Day. And some stuff like that, but it was two totally different environments.
While the band was in the studio recording albums, what was the crew doing? Were you both out on the road with other bands, or were you designing new stages, or were you just sort of on vacation?
Oh, it was never a vacation. Number one,
right?
It was we were always with the band. We had to attend to their needs. That's number one.
Okay.
Because they're in the studio, and you're on marked time. You're on studio time.
Right.
And so they have no time to goof around. It was all, they had their songs. They came in. They laid them down. Let's do this. Let's do that. Try this, try that kind of thing. Meantime, we were, working on the gear. Like JR said, trying to come up with something bigger, something better, or improved. Not better. Let's just say improved. But we were constantly, going out and looking for pieces and parts that we needed to do the show. So, yes, we were always with them to take care of them and to take care of the show.
Right. It was really a 24/7 kind of gig because, and I like to say, to paraphrase the U.S. Army commercial, we did more by 12 o'clock than most road crews did all day.
Right.
There was always something happening, whereas your typical road crew are concerned with the gear and the equipment on stage. Well, we not only had to deal with that, we had to deal with the special effects. We had to deal with the maintenance of the special effects. None of that stuff in those days
existed.
Being pioneers, that stuff was not designed to travel.
Right.
So for us, it was building new cases for fog machines. Constantly repairing the levitating drum machine that definitely was not meant to travel and be used. 7 different times a week in 7 different cities, flash pods, all of that stuff, the chemicals, just keeping inventory, ordering enough flash powder, for the bombs as they grew in size and that type of thing. And then, of course, was the makeup.
Right.
There's only so much makeup that you can travel with. So it was always something that had to be dealt with, planning ahead, to have a lot of this stuff meet up with us in a city, knowing that after X number of gigs we were going to be low on this or low on that. And, it was just a constant attention to detail as far as that went from the crew standpoint. We never had any time off.
You had...
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
There's one other thing there that we had to deal with. We had the sit-down brain work to do. We had the advances. In other words, we would, Ira Blacker, we would know to some extent, it would be coming in pieces, where was our string of next gigs, and who is on the bill, and we would have to some degree, try to contact the promoter and just say, hey, this, just give them a heads up. Here, here's who we are, because they, quite frankly, never heard of us. Right. We were new. We were brand new to the circuit, and so JR would have to do some work. Sean would have to do some work, pretty much in their court, just making advanced phone calls, and we'd have to call up and say, well, okay, well, we know we're new, but we need 250 pounds of dry ice, and then there was silence at the other end of the phone. What for? Well, for the fog machines. What fog machines? Yeah, we got 2 fog machines. Oh, by the way, we need this, and we need fire extinguishers all around the stage, in case one of them, what do you need? Because we use special effects. So you have to explain yourself. Well, we got bombs. Oh, you got what going off? Flash pods. They're bombs. And so you're explaining yourself to a guy you've never spoken to before, has never heard of the band, or maybe he has because they're on their second album, so they had a run of a bunch of gigs. But, there was that work as well, and that was time-consuming. It wasn't like you just hung around and, the band needs a new set of string. No. We were all-encompassing. We weren't just, like JR said, roadies worrying about what goes on stage. We were more management-oriented in a sense that we took care of a lot of stuff above and beyond what a normal roadie would take care of.
Right.
You follow me, Mitch?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So there was that time factor that has to be dropped in as well, on top of everything else. Because I was always out looking for, Peter needs tom-tom skins. Okay, let's go to wherever we were and see. Like JR said, you always had to keep your inventory up because we're going through it. I'd be ordering flash powder from the Nuco Powder Company in Loveland, Ohio, just so I never would run out. So, but that's part of the show. You run out of your explosive element, man. Boy, am I going to hear it. So there's this constant fixing of cases, fixing the LVM, and everything else. There was a palette of responsibilities that we had. Not to mention, the band needs this, the band needs that. Pick up Gene here, pick up Paul there. Ace, you always had to watch Ace. And Peter, so you had to get the bands, make sure you get them to the studio. We had rental cars, and, it was all, that's all time. That is all time. And so we were intrinsic in their lives.
Were there effects that you tried to design that the band just never got to use? I mean, Gene does the fire breathing, and Ace has got the smoking guitar, and Peter, rises up. Were there things that you had designed that for some reason or another you just couldn't get to the stage?
Yeah, well, Ace's smoking guitar came later on, way after me.
Right.
As far as going back to what we did, there was one thing in there that the original designers wanted, and it was just totally impractical, and it was the spiderweb. The original design called for a spiderweb behind the band. And to do
in what sense? Like a backdrop instead of like a
like a backdrop. I mean, this thing was not little. We're not talking about a little thing. We're talking something that was like 30 by 40 feet.
And what was the spiderweb supposed to do?
It was just nothing. It was just there as a stage prop, It was an annoyance, and it never went. So in answer to your question, that was one stage effect that was designed in and never went anywhere. Because number one, you need riggers. As soon as you start hanging things over people's heads, you need riggers. You need professional riggers. Well, we weren't in that position. Number two, we were opening up, and God, we had enough to worry about getting our amp lines and everything set up, and the ability to use our effects. And we just had enough time. Remember, we're opening act.
Right.
And sometimes we headlined, very rarely, and then sometimes we were a special guest. as the band went through the year. At least I'm talking about '74. So in answer to the question, yeah, there was some things that never.
It's funny, though, that you mentioned that, though, because everything in a Kiss show, from a fan's perspective, or at least my perspective, always has been created with a purpose. You know, the drums to go up was to make it look larger than life, and the guitarist mo. This sounds like it had absolutely no purpose other than just to be there.
Yeah, it was part of a dramatic set kind of thing.
Okay.
Right.
It had some drama to it. Oh, look at the spiderweb. I wonder what's going to crawl out. You know, it was totally ridiculous. It was a waste of time, a waste of money, and quite frankly, the reality of it is, it couldn't be implemented.
Yeah.
Not when you're the opening act. And even when they became a headlining act full time, they still didn't do it. They completely forgot about it.
Right.
You know?
Well, you know, Mitch, you brought up a good point about the drums levitating and all that. But see, what set that show apart was we did that stuff, like Moose is saying, we did that stuff as an opening act.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't, and I like to say, you know, we didn't raise the bar on that type of live performance. We made the bar.
Yeah, you created the bar.
We created that. You know, no one had seen, no band had the type of effects and effects driven show as an opening act, as a headline act, as we had, much less as an opening act, and we were able to pull it off every night, such to the point now that, you know, you go to a Kiss show now, the one thing I do know is
they have a spider. They have a spider now.
Well, they have a spider, so they went back to the
they
web.
Finally got it.
Yeah, you know, it's much easier to do that when you're the headlining act with 40-year history that has the largest stage that's on the road at the time. But when you're opening up and you're in front of a group like Savoy Brown, for example, and you've got literally 12 or 15 feet of stage to work with, and the drum riser alone is 8 by 8, you know, how the hell do we do that? Well, guess we found a way, you know, and we found a way to the point where when you look at the show today, it's for all intents and purposes the same show as what we put on as an opening act. Of course, it's bigger and it's shinier and it's better because they're the headliners and they have all the money. But we did, I would say, probably 75-80% of the show that they have today is the same show as what we did as an opening act, 40 years ago. And that for us, it's very gratifying, Our work, still stands the test of time, and that's a big deal for
it
those
goes to show how innovative it was. It really goes
not
to show
to mention, boys, not to mention, since then, how many bands have you seen that have put up pyrotechnics in their shows? Dozens.
Yeah. Well, all the bands in the 80s did.
We were a model for other bands to follow because they saw the dramatic effect. I mean, you could be a great band, and you get out there and you play your songs, but there is something about what the guys always wanted to do, and they've said it many times, they always wanted to give their fan their value for that $5 ticket.
So let me ask you about this now. The first album comes out, and it didn't really sell as that much. It did okay. The second album came out and did okay. Dress to Kill comes out and does okay. Was there a sense of panic within the band and within the crew saying, fuck, man, we've invested all this time, and is it all for nothing? Was there any panic that set in?
I wouldn't call it panic.
Right.
I think it's like just anticipation, because every gig that we did, every city that we played, something was going right because we were able to come back in an elevated position the next time. Some of those cities like Detroit and Cleveland, St. Louis, places like that, we played 2 or 3 times a year. And maybe the first time through we'd play in a club. Mm-hmm. Second time through we'd come in and we'd be, an opening act for a mid-level band in a 3,000-seat theater. The next time we came through, we were either headlining or special guests in that theater. And then when we came back the next year, we were in the arenas. You know what I mean? So something was happening. The band's live show was selling. Yeah, it was happening, and it was selling tickets. But
why wasn't it connecting with the record buying public then?
They didn't have Shout It Out Loud. They didn't have Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day at that point. They didn't have Detroit Rock City. They had some great songs, but evidently they weren't radio friendly to the radio that was being, you know, played at the time, to the songs that were being played at the time. You know, and eventually what happened was, as much as the band changing, the music changed as well, and radio became a lot more accepting of those anthems, those mega anthems that Paul wrote. He's a tremendous writer. But when you've got songs like Rock and Roll on My Party Every Day, and you know, Detroit Rock City, and you know, Beth, songs like that, then what happens is the radio station started to catch up with what the fans knew, and the fans knew that it was a great band because they saw them. They were out there. They remember this is before MTV or any of that stuff, so it wasn't like you could listen to a Kiss album and at the same point in time get that visual effect of what was happening as well. You know, you had to actually get up off your ass, get out of your house, and go to a show, you know, to see what was happening. Midnight Special on TV was, you know, few and far between, and even that was sterile, you know, compared to the band. Band was raunchy. They were leather and spit and, you know, and guts and blood, bombs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to get that same reaction until a live album came along, and they were able to capture that whole adrenaline rush, so to speak, you know, on that album. There was nothing there for radio to really latch onto. But the fans, the concert-going fans knew it, and that's what really kept the band alive long enough to get to the point where they could have those hit records.
Yeah, let's talk quickly then about Alive. The first thing you hear on Alive is you, JR, and the famous "You wanted the best, you got the best." Where did that come from? What was it scripted? Did somebody write it out for you? Where did that come from?
Well, I wrote it out for myself.
Okay.
Actually.
But did you have to sit and think about it for like months and months? Like, okay, I need a catchphrase, or
no.
Okay.
No. What happened was the band's original intro, which was done by Sean Delaney, was something like, "Okay, Chicago, are you ready to rock? Well, if you are, put your two lips together and kiss."
Right, and we see that on the San Francisco '75 show.
Yeah. You know, it was nice. You know, it was certainly better than "Ladies and Gentlemen, let's give a warm San Francisco welcome." You know, it was certainly better than that. You know what I mean? But it didn't give a hint about the mayhem that was about to be unleashed on the audience. You know, it was really kind of tame. And there was a point there where we were doing a lot of gigs with Blue Oyster Cult, a very big band at the time. They had Don't Fear the Reaper and a bunch of tracks like you know. And their intro was, "All right, you dogs, on your feet or on your knees, Blue Oyster Cult." And I'm like, wow, that's ballsy. Here these guys are walking around. I think the tallest guy was probably 5'7" or 5'8", and their intro was larger than life, you know. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, what the, you know, that was great. That got the audience's attention right away.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yep, that got the audience's attention right away.
Right. Yeah. So Peter, we're just talking about the Alive album.
Oh yeah.
So go ahead. So got the.
So you know, after seeing the reaction that Blue Oyster Cult got with their intro, you know, it was. I had been thinking, you know, that it was time. We needed something different. And what happened was there was a Toyota commercial at the time, very catchy commercial. You know, jingles are some of the biggest money makers in music.
Absolutely.
And,
it's a good gig.
Yeah, it really is. It's made the careers of a lot of people.
Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow, for sure. Luther Vandross,
yeah.
you know, and on and on and on. But they had a commercial, and their catch line was, "You asked for it, you got it, Toyota."
Yep, remember it well.
And the Hotter Than Hell album had recently come out, and everything was heat, hot, hotter, this and that. And it came to me in the course of an evening. You wanted the best, you asked for it, you wanted it, heat, hot, better, you know. And it just came out to be what it is. And here again, you know, like with the staging and the effects, I'm really proud to say that I wrote that. I was the first person to speak it, and it's obviously worked for them because they've either used that intro or a slightly varied version of that for the last 38 years since I've been with the band. So
let me just step back here. So basically, you wanted the best, you got the best. The hottest band in learned is sort of a combination of a PR angle for the Hotter Than Hell album mixed in with a Toyota commercial.
With a Toyota commercial.
That's fantastic.
You know, and you say it with enough attitude, you know, and it was designed to get people's attention and wake them up and, you know, smack them in the face and say, "Sit up, pay attention, you're about to get rocked," you know. And
did you have to run it by the band before you said it, though? Did you come up to Paul or Gene and say, "Listen, I came up with this tagline, this is what it is, what do you," or do you just get up on stage and announce them and people go,
It just happened. It just happened one night, as I recall. Sean was busy elsewhere. He would normally do the intro from the wings on stage, and he was not available that night for whatever reason. Maybe he was in the box office or dealing with some other nonsense.
Right.
And I had to do the intro, and I did it that one night, and every other night after that while I was there. You know, it was great because you could see, you know, the band, especially the first night and in the early going. You know, the band, they're going up there cold. You know, it's like a relief pitcher in baseball. Okay, it's your turn. Go ahead and win the game. You know, rock the house, and without any swings at bat or without, you know, any warm up pitches, you're expected to go out there and win the game. So I could see in their eyes, especially in the early going, okay, JR's going to do the intro, and the tension and the anticipation in the band really carried over from that intro, and it when they hit the first chords of Deuce, I mean, that was it. They were gone, and the audience went with them, and that was it. That was great.
Yeah. Now the other thing is, Gene and Paul have been described as having a very unique vision, a very, straight ahead. They knew what they wanted to do from the get-go, and Peter and Ace have always been described as troublemakers and this and that. But let's cast that aside. What were your impressions of the guys from those early days? Let's start with Gene. Let's go to Paul, and we'll do Peter and Ace after. What was your impression of Gene?
Moose, go for it.
Yeah, Moose.
Well, I wanted to back up to something you said earlier.
Okay, go ahead.
It's well documented in the book, Nothing to Lose. They could not get I had to go back to the airplay. They couldn't literally buy their way onto the air.
Nope.
They just couldn't get airplay. I don't know if they had. Remember now, going back 40 years, they had some people did not. Who were these? Look at this makeup over the top, and the show and everything. There was almost, a concerted effort not to get these guys on the air. I mean, for sure, you could turn around and start playing on rock stations. You could start playing Deuce. You could start playing Firehouse. You can make a hit. I mean, you got to remember, back then, when we worked a few gigs with Redbone, they had Come and Get Your Love, big hit. When they worked with Aerosmith for a few gigs, they had, I don't know if Sweet Emotion, but they did have something on the radio.
Dream On was big.
Yeah?
Yeah, Dream On. That was off the first album. Okay. Rush, they had something, Working Man, which was picked up by a rock station in Cincinnati. Everybody thought it was a new Led Zeppelin album. Ozzy had something. Blue Oyster Cult for sure had something. Fleetwood Mac, who we opened up for.
Mm-hmm.
Every band we opened up for had some kind of Airplay. All right? REO Speedwagon, Black Oak, Arkansas, and on and on and on. So they had Airplay. So, if you read the Nothing to Lose, there's a lot of people that have a lot to say about it. Regarding the Alive 1 album,
Right.
now, I was still in the cast, but I brought him up to that in my own humble way, brought him up to that point. But it was kind of like do or die. I mean, you talk about desperate. Listen, when they didn't have enough money to eat, and Mick had to go buy Mick Campisi had to go buy a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread with what money he had. There was no money.
Right.
The record company was like, this is do or die. I mean, okay, they did 300,000 sales on the first 3 albums. Okay. The record company, now that's not hay. That's $1 million, $5 an album. That's $1 million, $1.5 million in sales, another $1.5 million in sales. So they were getting some money, but going back to where this money came from, the $750,000 that came from Warner Brothers, that was loaned to Neil Bogart to start Casablanca Records, they hated Kiss. They didn't want anything to do with them. That's a well-known fact. So these poor guys, in a sense, and I say poor guys, is the odds were against them from many different angles. Not only from opening up,
right,
from hassling us, but with the record company, 2, with the radio stations, 3, with the money that's behind the record company, 4. Fortunately, Dick Clark liked them, and a few people like that, and that helped them. There was that, what do you call it, the diamond in the rough, so to speak. So they, like JR was saying, we playing clubs like the Bayou Club in Washington.
Right.
Then we'd do
famous show.
We'd do the Theater in the Round, Painter's Mill. Aerosmith was headlining, Redbone was special guest, and we were opening up. That's the night someone stole one of Gene's SVT heads. There was only 2 of us at that point. We're watching the stage and taking care of the stage. People are stealing our gear. So I just wanted to answer some of that as far as being under the gun. They were under the gun. They absolutely, Eddie Kramer did a magnificent job on it. They had to produce, because they were out of money. I mean, the record company wasn't giving them money. Guy had maxed out his credit cards. They were getting $500, $1,000, $2,000 a gig. Hell, it cost a lot more money than that. We weren't getting paid at some point. We weren't getting paid. There was no money for anything. So, when you got no money and you're on the road, you damn right it's desperate times.
Yeah, it's got to be. I'm amazed that you guys didn't pack it up and go home. Are you amazed that you didn't pack it up and go home? Do you look back and say, Jesus Christ, what was I thinking?
It's funny that this conversation should even take this route, because, honest to God, the chapter that is going to be released electronically out on the streets, our book is in the next day or 2. It talks specifically about the lack of funds, and everybody, not just the crew, the band themselves, they were upset. It was really down to it. When Moose says that Mick actually had to go, leave the hotel to go to the 7-Eleven to buy a loaf of bread,
right,
and a jar of peanut butter so that we could eat that night. I mean, that's the truth. That's how desperate it was. I think, like I said, anybody in the crew, I think what it was is everybody was so dedicated. Everybody believed it. Everybody believed that it was going to happen. Everybody believed that if we just did our gig, whatever that was, that it was going to happen for the band, and when it happened for the band, it would happen for everybody.
Go ahead.
Yeah? No, go ahead.
You got to dovetail in there. Why? You see, he brought up a very good point. Why didn't we just pack it up and go home?
Yeah.
And I'll let JR speak to this, but I will tell you this, in no uncertain terms. We were running on empty based on a promise. We were given a promise. And in so many words, I mean, it came from Paulie, for sure, was that, when we make it, quote, we'll take care of you. And so that gave us the impetus and the desire to say, okay, we're going to hang with you.
Okay, but the question would be then, why would you believe or trust Paul? Because there's a million rock stars and a million rock bands in New York and LA at the time, and they all made the same promises to their crew, and some, like Kiss, delivered, and a lot didn't.
About that. I don't know. Well, first of all, there weren't a million, and second of all, the other thing is, too, that they weren't out there on the road making albums and selling and driving the fans crazy. There weren't that many bands out there from, let's say... Yeah,
but you don't think the Brats might have said the same thing to their crew, or the New York Dolls said the same thing to their crew?
Possibly, but that's only two. And they kind of went by the wayside. We didn't trip over them too much on the road.
Okay.
We were opening up with well-established bands at the time. All right? Not them. We played a few gigs with them, but they were doing chump gigs. They really weren't. They weren't opening up for Ozzy. They weren't opening up for Aerosmith or REO Speedwagon or Blue Oyster Cult and on and on and on. They were nowhere to be seen because they didn't have the appeal, the draw. Now, yes, they may have said to their crew when we make it, but see, they weren't out there. We were looking at Kiss and went, Jesus, there's 2 albums, and they're working on a 3rd album. And by the way, here comes a potential live album. And we look at the response from the audience, and we look at the enthusiasm of the boys. And we said, they're okay. Why would we believe Paul? Because we were intrinsic in their life. We lived with them. We were involved with them to every degree of their life at that point, including protecting them.
Right.
So, JR, you can dovetail into this.
Mitch, I think the important thing is, we can sit here today and say, well, everybody knows that, bands do that, but in '74, people didn't know that bands did that because bands hadn't done it. It's because of stories like ours that people know that bands do that shit.
But I also think, I was also trying to see if maybe, because everything I've heard about Paul and Gene is that they really were very convincing. You could see that they were destined for success because they had that work ethic. They just had that something, right?
Sure.
And I, had I been in New York at that time, I probably would have bought into it too, because you could just look at them and say, yeah, this guy's destined for success. He knows what he's doing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
For sure. But then you also have to realize that it went beyond Gene and Paul. Those same sentiments were shared by management as well. It was no secret that we had been taking a major pay cut from where we previously worked to do this, and our fault or the mistake that we made was not getting any of this stuff in writing.
Right.
It was uncharted territory. Really, I don't know of a story wherein a band was told, stick with us, blah blah blah. I mean, before that,
right.
You know what I mean. Okay. So there was no template to go by. There was like, okay, fine. You know what? That's cool. I believe in you. I'm going to accept this now. Sign this document and blah. It wasn't about that. We were, of course, employees, but we were also friends.
Okay.
And we were also family. When we traveled, it was the 4 guys in the band, Sean Delaney, and 3 or 4 guys in the crew. Never more than 8 of us, and for the longest time, only 7 of us, never more than for the longest time there were 8 of us, including Sean.
Right.
And when you're 1,000 miles from home and you do that for hundreds of shows in a year, you begin to to develop a camaraderie. It was a family. It was a business. It was all things rolled into one. And we had nothing in our minds that would tell us, you know what, this could change at any day and time. You know, get this in writing. It wasn't that kind of party. You know what I mean? And we've since found, and everyone else has found, that you know, the nicest and the best sentiments don't always work out the way that either party sometimes, you know, will expect them to. And that's why lawyers are making
ton of money.
$500 an hour plus now, as opposed to the $1.25 that they were making back then. You know?
Hey, Mitch, I want to jump in here with JR, cutting in and out, since it is a conversation.
Yeah.
I have to say that if we're at fault in anywhere, in any of this that went down, we took possession of the band. In other words, we made them ours. And what I've said before on other types of podcasts was, we believed in them so much that we literally I worked my way into a hospital bed for them. Guys got sick on the road for them, our little crew. They were so dependent upon us, like JR said, in the sense it was a family, in a sense. But again, our biggest fault was we took possession and ownership. We believed them, and we wanted, quite frankly, to see them make it.
Right.
There's no wiggle room. Gene can or Paul can. None of them can refute this. And you know, we said, okay, we'll stay with you because, hey, JR and I were from New York. They're a New York band. All right. We saw the other New York bands kind of go by the wayside, but this band was out there selling records, doing shows, one after the other, with big opening acts. So they were head and shoulders above everybody else as far as a new upcomer, a new upstart band, specifically out of New York City.
Right.
So we took ownership, which is something that I did even in my professional life. When I was working as an employee for the studios, I took ownership in some of it because, you know, I wanted everything to work and work right technically, and to that day, that's been my work ethos, ethic, whatever you want to call it. That's just been me. That's my DNA. That's how I'm built.
Right.
All right. Till the day I die, I will be the same person. So that's why we didn't just pack up and say, oh, you know, screw you guys. You know, we didn't want to let the boys down. Because had we pulled out, what are they going to do? There was nobody else around that would work for nothing. You know, so what would they do? We would essentially sink them for a time until they managed to muster together some money, another crew, and, you know, be able to go through what we went through and actually have the crew put up with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot in and around that question that you brought up. But anyway, JR, I just had to jump in and add that.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
So, you know, since you had, you know, you felt this belonging and stuff, when you saw some of the band members, and maybe I shouldn't name names, who would bitch and moan and complain and then threaten to quit the band, and were you like, oh my God, what if this guy actually quits? What are we going to do? Did that ever kind of fear set into you guys when you heard this?
Not me.
No.
Not me.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yes, speaking for myself personally, same thing. Whatever problems that started to happen didn't happen or weren't happening within the sight line of
the band,
the
crew.
crew.
Okay.
At any rate, you know, to that rate, and I always say, you know, everything was fine. Everything was really fine. Granted, the band, the four types in the band were totally different, and probably would not have been great friends had they not been in a band.
Okay.
But They worked to make it happen. They knew that they had a sound. They knew that they had something, you know, and it wasn't really until the money started to trickle in the 76, so, that era, that time, shall we say, after the Alive, was really starting to hit, that things really started to get out of the hand. And, it was right around that time where we were let go. So a lot of the stuff that happened, and I hear horror stories, might things have been different if they were surrounded by some of their closest friends and confidants. I'd like to think maybe things would have been different if we were around, but who knows?
Of course they would have. Absolutely, JR, because Bobby McAdams and all those guys, they were home guys. They never took it to the road. And let me tell you, playing around in the studios and doing local gigs, and you go home at night is a whole lot different than packing up that truck and hitting that super slab and taking it to Louisville and taking it to Detroit and Chicago and Springfield and Memphis and Knoxville and on and on and on and living out of a suitcase. They wouldn't hold up, man. They didn't have no stick. I'm sorry. Or else they would have done it. If they were friends, why didn't you do it? Why did you not go out there and help your friends out?
Yeah, true.
Because they didn't have the freaking cojones that we did. We had a kick-ass ethos, And Gene even said it again in Nothing to Lose. I forget the page. It's in the 300 somewhere. It's at the bottom in the paragraph. And he was talking about big guys, and Gene was quoted as saying, "We had two, and they were JR and Moose."
Yeah.
He says that. It's in the book.
Yeah. Oh, I remember reading that. Now, so
now the other thing is nobody would pull their buck knives on Aerosmith's crew because they wouldn't give us the room at the Michigan Palace and threatened to slash their drums and cut their cables if they didn't give us more room to put on our show. We did the show. And I reminded the boys when they signed my book last September down at Barnes & Noble at the Grove here in Los Angeles. I said, Gene goes to me, he goes, "You pulled a knife on Hamilton? Because this is Hamilton, the bass player for Aerosmith, recounting that there were knives involved regarding the cruise." And that's what we thought. We would go to blows for this band. And we did go to blows for this band.
Absolutely.
There's no question about it.
Absolutely.
All right, we pulled our knives and said, "Look, mothers, we don't play, you don't play," in so many words. And we got enough room to set up our amp line. That's what it took. Because especially in the South, we were not just Yankees, man. We were damn Yankees. Leonard Skinner, they hated it.
Can I ask you a question about the South and some of those areas? When the Krew comes in, and listen, if the question is out of order, just tell me so. But when the Krew comes in, and you've got Bill, and you've got Sean, and their sexuality, and you've got JR, who at the time, an African American working with did the promoters or anybody
an uppity African American, please.
An uppity. No, but seriously, back in that context, was an African American and two gay men. Did you run into a lot of promoters or people that gave you all kinds of trouble and said, "Hey, what are these people doing in my venue?" Or did you run into any kind of stuff like that?
First of all, they didn't know Guy and Paul were gay. That's number one. JR, it's as plain as the skin on his face.
Yeah.
Our issue was pretty much, you're the opening act, you're scum. Oh, by the way, what is all this, makeup and these costumes kind of thing? Yeah. And special effects. Our fight was pretty much technical.
Okay.
Getting the show on and having to deal with bands that didn't dress up in their, jeans and T-shirts. Like Rory Gallagher, for instance. He was a headliner. He walked there with a bunch of twin reverbs, a bass amp, and a drum kit, but he was headlining. The band was disciplined. They had a structure.
Okay.
And so that was our big issue. Not that no one knew that those two guys were gay, lovers, whatever. It didn't matter.
Okay.
Growing up in New York City, that didn't matter to me.
No, I would imagine it didn't matter to you or to the band, but I could see a promoter coming in or a cop or at a security and saying, "Hey, what's that guy doing here? He seems a little. So you didn't run into any, which is actually good to hear.
Now, on the sexuality side, no. But on the JR situation, it's well documented about our trips to up in Kokomo, Indiana, and Peru, Indiana, where the KKK would have their initials stenciled on every garbage can. Oh, they let you know who they were.
Yeah,
no question about it. And we would just
no one ever came to us and confronted. No one ever came to me and confronted me on a racial level. Did they say things behind my back? I'm sure. Guess what? I don't give a shit what you say behind my back. You have a problem with me? Be a man. Step up and say it. It didn't happen. And the bottom line is that no matter what type of environment that we went into, no matter where the town was, like us or not on the way in, to the man, they dug us on the way out because they saw what our work ethic did. They saw the results of the show and what that had, the effect that had on the audience. And certainly the promoters realizing, especially after the first year or so, who was selling the lion's share of the tickets.
Yeah.
It was not a problem, believe me.
Right, exactly. The bottom line, JR just hit the nail on the head more than once. The bottom line was when those fans stood up and they felt the concussion of the bombs, they smelled they saw Gene spitting fire. Who the hell does that? They saw they smelled the gunpowder in the air. They saw the fog. If you were up close, you got wet. You know what I mean? It was a very organic type of interplay, and of course the music. When the promoter sees that, he goes, "Wow, I could probably sell these guys again." But look, look at the crowd.
So I guess the bottom line is that money talks and bullshit walks, right? I mean, they didn't care about anything. They just went, "Listen, I don't care who you put on that stage or who brings them to the stage. If I'm making money, it's all good."
Right. Well, that's why you're in business as a promoter. You have to. That's your living. That's how you support your lifestyle. That's how you keep prestige amongst the ranks. You have to make money and to survive. The band has to make money to survive. So the record company has to make. It's all linked. Every bit of it is linked. Even of course, the Krew is linked to all of this stuff. So, yeah, that's where it lies. And the only one thing that I regret is that, and I thought about this, JR. My mother made the first Kiss T-shirts with the rhinestones on the dining room table. Mm-hmm. She had a brisk machine. She was a pattern maker designer on 7th Avenue, which is a big thing for 48 years. And she made those original shirts. She showed me the stencil last month. She still has the stencil that she used for the Kiss logo. My point that I wish I had done was when we had no money. I know, JR, we could have sold a few hundred T-shirts. I should have said, I should have called up my mother and said, go to the printer, give me 500 T-shirts silk screened with that logo. Forget the rhinestones. Just silk screen the logo. I wasn't, 40 years in presentism, looking at the past with today's eyeballs, it's a totally different story.
Oh, yeah.
But
absolutely.
had I had a bit more business conscience back then, I would have gone out and started merchandising. And we could have picked up some money from selling T-shirts. We probably could have made more money selling T-shirts than the band actually made playing.
Or selling records at the time. Now, both as people and as players, JR, what did you think of Peter, Ace, Gene, Paul?
Peter was an energetic drummer. He certainly was not the most technically proficient, but he had a sound and he had a drive that moved the beat for Kiss, and that was all they needed. That was great. Ace, great player, nice guy, crazy as hell, as everybody knows. But Ace's playing was the same kind of guy that Ace was. Just a little bit out of whack, but always interesting. You know, Gene, even in those days, wanted to be the intellectual and the guy that thought that he knew it all, and as dedicated as anybody. You know, he knew he was going to make it. He knew for sure that Kiss was going to be it for him. And Paul as well, adequate guitar player, but a great songwriter. Grew to become a great front man, the lead singer for the band. And you put four very different guys together, and you stir it up a little bit, and
it worked.
What you had was Kiss.
Yeah, and Peter, what did you think? What on a both personal and professional level?
Well, let's go with the professional. Let's start with Peter. You know, you got to remember, going back to the Beatles, you know, Ringo wasn't the most technically proficient either, but Ringo had one thing that very few drummers had. He had timing that was as tight as a Swiss watch.
Yeah.
That's what Peter had. Okay? Peter, no other drummer would have satisfied the requirements for Kiss but Peter Criss. And same with Ace and with Paul and with Gene. No, they all just blended together in their own different ways. You know? So professionally, I would say, you know, you don't need to be... Peter was a tight drummer. Gene was a tight bass player. If you go back and you listen to that first album, Gene was very tight. They were all very tight. And no junk notes. They never pitched out. They never broke meter. I mean, as being a bass player and JR being a drummer, we hear these things. You know, we kind of look down in there in the rabbit hole a little bit. So I would say no other four members could have of the original band would have made Kiss, but those four guys. You know, Peter Criss didn't have to be Neil Peart. All right, Neil was a brilliant, magnificent drummer. We all know that. But Peter brought what Kiss needed to drumming. You know, they didn't need to go out. And by the way, he had some moves on him. You know,
and he played for the song too.
Yeah, and Ace was a kick-ass lead guitarist, in my opinion. He was up there. I mean, he was like a Jimmy Page clone, in my mind. Paulie was a great songwriter, and he knew his rhythm, you know. And Gene was a very tight bass player, and they had good voices for rock and roll. You got to remember, there are a number of people out there that once they made it have admitted, you know, I really didn't have a great voice, like Kenny Loggins, like Barry Manilow. You know, people like that, they didn't have great voices, but they could appeal with what they had. They had an appeal to people. And, you know, we're not looking for the three tenors here, man. No. You know, we're not looking for opera. We're looking for some guys who can punch it out in key. So that on the professional level, okay. On the personal level, for me, it was, you know, they were propped up by management, particularly Sean, that I always had a saying, there were stars before there were stars. In a lot of ways, they had bupkis. They were on the balls of their ass, but they acted like they were big. And that was what Sean instilled in the front part of their brain, to act like, to be a star. Don't sit back and go, you know, I'll wait to be a star and then I'll act like a star. And in that, you know, sometimes not so much with Paulie, but a little bit more with Gene, a little bit less with Peter. Ace never gave us any real stuff. But let me tell you, if those flash pods weren't just loud enough, boy, did I hear about it. And then I said, but guys, you know, I got a fire marshal over here. It's going to shut us down. So I always had to walk that line between getting yelled at by the band or by Gene, never by Ace, never by Paul, a little bit by Peter, but mostly Gene. He was always kind of like JR said, like a business front man. You know, we need him to have him bigger. Yeah, man, it's going to be okay, great. But do you want this fire marshal to send the word out around the community, and I'll show you a map of the United States? The next gig you go to, you will not be allowed to use your effects because you disrespected and disobeyed a fire marshal who's got nothing but public safety on his mind. Mm-hmm. So I personally had to walk that line and put up with some of their crap sometimes. And I said, okay, I'll do my best, and I'll make it brighter, and I'll add some magnesium. I'll add more smoke, so I'll add more carbon. I'll give it a little more concussion. I was always concocting stuff for the bombs. It was not just, Nuco flash powder all the time. I had already taken chemistry in college. I knew a little bit about mixing stuff.
Right.
So on the personal level, they were stars before they were stars. In other words, they had it in their head, and they were acting it out. And Peter was kind of like the biggest one that was being immature about it, always wanting to quit the band. That didn't affect us. It was just like, you know what, get up there and just play. Just he was always had this insecurity. I don't know why. They were on their way to making it. He couldn't bring himself to let that old world Italian kind of woe is me, and I say it because I've seen it in my own ethnicity.
Right.
Kind of thing like, I'm feeling sorry for myself, so I think I'll quit the band. It's like, stupid, you got it going right now. But, again, that's looking at it from today's eyeballs. So that's my response professionally and personally regarding them.
Well, that was a wonderful response. And, I never had to cut off an interview before, and it's driving me crazy. But we started at 2:00 today where we were supposed to, and then all kinds of stuff happened. It's now 4:00. Not that it's going to matter when people hear this. We've got to do this again, and I'm just going to have to say, Peter and JR, thank you. It's been absolutely enlightening and wonderful to speak with you both. And, of course, check out Original Kiss Krew, the Original Kiss Krew with a K.com, and looking forward to reading it and to more stories. And, we got to do a part 2.
Absolutely, Mitch. Thanks a lot. Appreciate the support, man.
Anytime.
Yeah. Thanks, Mitch. Same here. Ditto with what JR just said.
Hey,
all right,
rock and roll, man. Thank
again. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, Mitch.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk again.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
guys.
There you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed our interview with Peter Moose and, of course, J.R. Smalling talking about their book, Out on the Streets, The True Tales of Life on the Road with Kiss, available at originalkisskrew.com. Folks, or Mark and Russ, always interesting to hear Kiss stories, especially the early days.
Yes, Mitch, we know you love Kiss, and it's great to hear those stories. Absolutely.
But you love Kiss as well.
I do. I love Kiss. I like the early stuff. I'm not as fanatical about it as you are. I have Elvis to be fanatical about.
Have you ever considered singing the song "Come On and Love Me"?
I think I might have considered it. I think I might have sung it.
Yeah,
actually.
And I also know that if you go to YouTube, you can find a killer version of the Killer Dwarfs doing Cold Gin from, I think, like 1990 or something.
Oh yeah, we used to do a lot of we just all of a sudden start playing a cover tune or something out of the blue. We never really had a set list. There was like a basic framework to go by, but sometimes we just bust into tunes, and we always pulled out a lot of stuff like that.
And Mitch, you mentioned the song "Come On and Love Me." That is your favorite Kiss song of all time, correct?
It is. It's absolutely the greatest song. I think it defines Kiss. It's sort of a nice 3 minutes of blazing guitars, great vocals, and sort of that, I don't want to say it, but that sort of cheesy lyric, just say, "Come on and love me, baby, baby," right? I mean, Russ, you love those kind of baby, baby songs, don't you?
Yeah, it's definitely Shakespeare. It's fun. It's a fun song to sing, and I don't know, Mitch. I think you're building up to some surprise that's coming
at some point. Yeah. We'll get to the surprises soon, but there's always more Kiss coming. That's very important in everybody's life. There you go. Next week we've got a show with Loretta Carr, Eric Carr's sister, and we've got a bunch of great interviews coming up. Everybody from John 5 of Rob Zombie's band, Blitz of Overkill, Rachel Bolan, Monster Truck. Stay tuned, folks. Lots of good stuff coming. And, of course, if you want to win tickets to see Skid Row in Montreal August 19th, listen to that Rachel Bolan interview. There will be another special sentence to mark down and right into the Facebook page. And of course, One on One is brought to you by the Heavy Montreal Festival, taking place August 9th and 10th at Parc Jean Drapeau, featuring Metallica, Slayer, Offspring, Lamb of God, Anthrax, Twisted Sister, Bad Religion, and of course, Russ, your personal favorite, Beheading of a King.
I have all their album.
Of course. Mark, are you going to come up to Heavy Montreal?
I'm thinking about it. It's going to be a little difficult because
You're on vacation that
yeah, I'm
week.
on vacation, and I actually need to get back to New Jersey right after the vacation ends for a few reasons, including to pick up my dog. But having said that, I haven't ruled it out yet, and I'm trying to figure out a way that I could maybe get up there for one of the 3 nights. I'll definitely keep you posted, because it just sounds like it's going to be an absolute amazing time. And, you know, I haven't seen Metallica, probably in about 3 to 4 years, and I would really like to see them this year, and it sounds like this is going to be my only opportunity. So
It
hoping
really
to get
is.
up there, at least for the Metallica night.
And folks, you just heard Mark mention 3 nights. The shows are August 9th and 10th, but on August 8th, the night before, there is a pre-Heavy Montreal show, still sponsored by the festival, that takes place downtown. And those details have yet to be announced, but it's going to be a great night either way. There you go, folks.
Yes, remember to check out TalkingMetalDigital.com, guys, and Mitch's PayPal is MitchMinute@AOL.com. Throw him a donation and show some support for this show.
Absolutely. And Russ, come on, give a few plugs in there. Where should we find you?
You can find me at where can you find me?
Well,
I think I'm on Facebook and
well,
somewhere.
you've got your
you
Russ
yeah,
Dwarf Twitter, of course. That's the
right.
best place to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
You know more about it than I do.
And you've got Daryl Dwarf's Wedding Killer
Yes.
Dwarf show coming up July 25th. So fill in the details on that one.
July 25th in Akron, New York, at Bronze Concert Cove. Daryl's getting married, and the preacher that day is Luke Carl from Sirius Satellite Radio, and Ted Poley is there playing with us.
From Danger.
From Danger, and Cheap Thrill, a couple.
From
Cinderella and Brandon Gibbs is the singer in that band, and our good friend, the Reverend John Karabi, will also be there.
Oh,
so
nice.
it should be a great day, and we'll see you in rehab on the Saturday.
Right on. Hey, and Russ, I saw some exciting news that you or somebody located a box of CDs stashed, hidden somewhere in an office or warehouse. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And can you tell me how I will be able to buy one of them?
Well, Mark, we'll talk after the show. But yes, I moved a year ago, and I had a whole storage unit, and we've just actually started getting to all this stuff that I have, because I've collected everything over the years, plus my Elvis collection and everything. And we discovered a couple of cases of Stand Tall. So
Nice.
I think that's going to be coming up. I don't know how we're going to be able to do that, because there's been a million requests for that. But we won't be jamming everyone for $250. I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
Because
Don't forget to mention it's the 2001 reissue of Stand Tall.
It is. It's
Right.
it's the reissue, the remastered version of it.
Nice.
So yeah, should be fun,
All right.
and I'm glad. It was great to find that.
Yeah,
So-
it's exciting.
Yeah, it's a great sounding album. I think I have those reissues, and nothing better than Russ Dwarf cleaned up.
There you go, Mitch.
Right? All right, folks.
All right, guys.
I think we've
All
rambled
right.
on long enough.
Awesome.
Cool.
Cheers.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Cheers,
All right.
Mark. Cheers, Mitch.